Welcome back to our quiet space. Gently close your eyes. Leave the hustle and bustle of the modern world outside the door. Now, feel your body sinking into the mattress, soft and loose. Let your mind drift to the land of the pharaohs, where the legendary Nile River still flows through thousands of years of history. Tonight, we are not here to decipher mysteries or memorize dates. We are here to immerse ourselves in eternal silence. Imagine yourself lying on a small boat, drifting gently on cool water under the starry sky of the desert. You do not need to try to remember anything. Let the flow of history wash away all worries and bring you to the shore of peaceful sleep. The story begins. Did you know that there once existed a great empire far larger and far older than the famous Roman Empire? A civilization that rose from the heart of the desert, built its glory upon the Nile River, and left behind wonders that even today humanity can barely comprehend. That was ancient Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, of eternal pyramids, of gods who ruled over life and death. But even the greatest empire must one day fall. And the story of the fall of ancient Egypt is not only a tale of sand, stone, and time, it is also the story of human pride, of power, of faith, and of fate itself. For nearly 3,000 years, Egypt stood as the most advanced civilization of its age. Its people mastered architecture, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and believed deeply that life did not end at death. They built temples, tombs, and cities to ensure eternity. And perhaps that belief that the world they created would last forever was what made their downfall so tragic. At its height, the Egyptian empire stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the heart of Nubia in Africa, from the deserts of Libya to the borders of the Middle East. It was a land where the Nile flooded each year, bringing fertility to the soil and abundance to the people. But behind that prosperity lay a fragile balance, one that depended entirely on the rhythm of the river and the faith of the people in their divine kings. The pharaohs. As centuries passed, that balance began to break. And strangely, it was not an outside enemy that brought Egypt down, but forces from within: the slow decay of faith, the corruption of power, and the loss of unity among its own people. Because when a civilization grows too confident in its own eternity, it begins to forget the reason it once thrived, and thus what made Egypt magnificent: its divine kings, its vast wealth, its grand temples would, in the end, become the very seeds of its downfall. Let us turn back time more than 5,000 years ago, to the moment when the first rays of civilization dawned upon the Nile Delta. Here, among vast stretches of desert and an unforgiving sun, human life gathered around the river that gave them everything: water, food, and the foundation for survival. The Nile was not merely a river, it was the heartbeat of Egypt, the divine thread connecting heaven and earth, gods and men. Each year, as the floods returned, people saw it not as a natural cycle, but as a miracle sent by the gods. The river overflowed, leaving behind layers of fertile black soil, turning a barren wasteland into a paradise of abundance. And from that abundance, the world's first great kingdom arose Upper and Lower Egypt, eventually united under a single ruler, Pharaoh Narmer, also known as Menes. He became the first pharaoh, the god king of Egypt, and from that moment, a legend spanning millennia began. In the earliest centuries, the pharaohs were not merely kings, they were seen as living gods. They were believed to carry divine essence, the bridge between mortal men and the gods above. Every word they spoke, every decision they made, shaped not only politics and law, but also the spiritual faith of millions. It was during this era that the Egyptians built the first monumental tombs, the step pyramids of Saqqara, the precursors to the later wonders of Giza. They believed that death was not the end, but the beginning of another journey, one that required preparation, ritual, and preservation. Thus began their obsession with eternity, a belief that would define Egyptian culture for thousands of years. The early dynasties laid the foundation of a stable and prosperous state. They developed writing hieroglyphs, carved into stone and painted upon temple walls. They learned to track the stars, to predict the flooding of the Nile, to organize labor for massive constructions. And as Egypt grew in knowledge and wealth, it became not just a kingdom, but a symbol of divine order, Ma'at, the harmony between gods, nature, and humanity. By the time of the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BCE, Egypt entered what many historians now call its first golden age, a period of incredible peace, innovation, and unity when the pharaohs of the Fourth Dynasty, such as Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, built the pyramids of Giza, monuments that would outlast empires and time itself. And with those pyramids, Egypt's glory reached the heavens. For the first time in human history, a civilization had conquered both earth and sky, and a true golden era had begun. But every glory must one day fade. Even the mightiest structures, no matter how high they reach, cannot escape the slow erosion of time or of the human heart. After centuries of peace and prosperity, cracks began to appear within Egypt's perfect order. The cost of building the pyramids was enormous. Tens of thousands of workers, endless stone, years of labor all drawn from the people. While the pharaohs sought eternity for themselves, the common folk began to shoulder the weight of divine ambition. Taxes rose, harvests were claimed, and as the Nile's floods began to fail more frequently, famine spread across the land. When people's faith wavered, the divine image of the pharaoh, once absolute, began to crumble. They no longer saw him as a god, but as a man who had failed to protect them. And when faith in the pharaoh faded, the foundation of the entire civilization shook. Records from that period, known as the First Intermediate Period, describe Egypt torn apart by internal conflict. Regional governors, called nomarchs, began to seize power for themselves. Instead of one kingdom under a single divine ruler, Egypt splintered into many small territories, each ruled by its own local lord. Civil wars broke out. Temples were looted. The Nile, once the symbol of life, became the silent witness of death. No longer did pyramids rise. Instead, hunger and despair spread like a shadow across the valley. The priests, once protectors of spiritual order, used faith for power. The nobles fought among themselves for land and wealth. The once united empire, which had looked eternal, became a battlefield of greed and division. And as centuries passed, the name of the pharaoh no longer echoed across the land of Egypt. The great monuments stood deserted, half buried in sand remnants of a glory that seemed to have vanished forever. Egypt had lost its divine unity, and the land slowly sank into chaos. But history always moves in strange cycles. After the darkness, the Nile once again overflowed, and from the ruins of chaos, a new dawn began to rise. Around 2050 BCE, a powerful ruler from Thebes Mentuhotep II succeeded in reuniting Egypt. He restored the authority of the pharaoh, brought peace back to the land, and established the Middle Kingdom, the second great age of Egypt. This period marked the revival of the empire. Temples were rebuilt, trade routes reopened, and art flourished once more. The pharaohs of this era learned from the failures of the past. They sought to rule not by divine distance, but by wisdom and compassion, calling themselves shepherds of the people instead of gods on earth. During this time, the Egyptians expanded their influence southward into Nubia, securing access to gold and valuable minerals. They also built irrigation canals to control the Nile's floods more precisely, ensuring that agriculture would thrive even in difficult years. It was a time of balance between faith and reason, between divine rule and human understanding. But despite its prosperity, the Middle Kingdom was not free from danger. Foreign tribes, drawn by Egypt's wealth, began to appear in the eastern delta. At first, they came as traders and settlers, but soon they would become invaders, and their arrival would change the course of Egyptian history forever. Still, for nearly 400 years, under the rulers of the 11th and 12th dynasties, Egypt lived through a renaissance of power, art, and stability, a rebirth that once again made the Nile Valley shine, ushering Egypt into the era known as the Middle Kingdom. However, no dynasty lasts forever. As time passed, the kings of the Middle Kingdom gradually lost the wisdom and strength of their predecessors. Luxury and complacency returned to the royal court. The pharaohs, once regarded as shepherds of the people, again became distant figures more concerned with their own comfort than with the well-being of their nation. The priests, too, began to grow powerful. The temples of Amun in Thebes became immensely wealthy, collecting taxes, land, and offerings. The balance between spiritual faith and political authority tilted once again, and, as before, that imbalance bred corruption. Meanwhile, Egypt's borders grew vulnerable. In the eastern delta, nomadic tribes from Asia, known as the Hyksos, slowly settled and built their own communities. At first, they traded with the Egyptians and adopted local customs. But as their numbers and influence grew, they began to form alliances and arm themselves with new weapons, chariots, and bronze blades unknown to Egypt at that time. Around 1700 BCE, a sudden change occurred. The central power of the pharaoh collapsed. Internal rebellion spread. And taking advantage of the chaos, the Hyksos seized control of the northern territories, establishing their own dynasty in the city of Avaris. Egypt was now divided once more, the north under foreign rule, the south under native Theban kings. For nearly a century, the land of the Nile was ruled by outsiders. The Egyptians, once the masters of civilization, were now forced to pay tribute to those they once called barbarians. The humiliation was deep, but from that pain, a new strength began to grow in the south. The Theban princes, refusing to submit, quietly gathered forces and waited for their moment to strike back. And when that moment came, it would mark one of the most remarkable comebacks in history, but also the beginning of the final, long road toward decline. Because each resurrection came with a cost, and the weakening of the royal court became the opportunity for those beyond Egypt's borders. Around 1550 BCE, the people of Thebes rose up. Under the leadership of Amosa there, the Egyptian army, newly equipped and united under a single banner, marched north to reclaim their land. After years of war, the Hyksos were finally driven out of the delta and back into Asia. For the first time in centuries, Egypt stood united once more. But this time, it was not the same peaceful kingdom as before. It had become a warrior empire, hardened, ambitious, and determined never to be humiliated again. Thus began the era historians call the New Kingdom, the Age of Empire, conquest, and unprecedented wealth. The pharaohs of this period were no longer just kings of the Nile. They became emperors who extended Egypt's borders far beyond its traditional lands into Syria, Palestine, and deep into Nubia. Their armies were unmatched, their temples immense, their names immortal. Among them were some of the greatest rulers in human history: Thutmose III, the Napoleon of Egypt, who led 17 victorious campaigns across Asia; Queen Hatshepsut, one of the few female pharaohs, who ruled with wisdom and diplomacy, opening vast trade routes to Punt and beyond; and later, Amenhotep III and Akhenaten, who reshaped religion and art itself. This was the height of Egyptian civilization, the age when the colossal temples of Karnak, Luxor, and Abu Simbel rose to touch the sky, when the wealth of Egypt dazzled the known world, and when even foreign kingdoms bowed before the power of the pharaoh. But as always, power is a double-edged sword. The same ambition that had once saved Egypt now began to consume it from within. Because with wealth and victory came pride, extravagance, and endless struggle for power, and Egypt entered the period known as the New Kingdom. During the New Kingdom, one of the most controversial events in Egyptian history occurred, an event not born from war or invasion, but from faith itself. Around 1350 BCE, Pharaoh Amenhotep IV ascended the throne. But unlike his predecessors, he was not content to worship the many gods of Egypt. He believed in only one Aten, the sun disk, the supreme god who gave life to all things. Renaming himself Akhenaten, he proclaimed the birth of a new faith, the worship of a single god. It was a revolution, perhaps the first monotheistic religion in human history. Akhenaten closed temples dedicated to other gods, especially the powerful cult of Amun in Thebes. He moved the capital to a new city he called Akhetaten, today's Amarna, devoted entirely to Aten, and declared that only through him could Aten's light reach mankind. To his followers, he was a visionary, a prophet who saw beyond the ancient order. But to the priests and nobles, he was a heretic who defied centuries of tradition and threatened the foundations of their power. For the first time, the unity between religion and the state, which had sustained Egypt for millennia, was broken. During his reign, art and culture also changed drastically. Instead of rigid, idealized figures, artists began to depict human emotions. Pharaohs and queens portrayed not as distant deities, but as real people, laughing, touching, living as families. It was a fleeting glimpse of humanity in a world ruled by gods. But as years passed, the empire weakened. Without the support of the priests and generals, Akhenaten's reforms left Egypt vulnerable. Foreign enemies attacked its borders, and the people grew disillusioned. When Akhenaten died, his new religion collapsed with him. The old gods returned. His name was erased from monuments. His city abandoned a warning carved into history. This was the Amarna period, a brief but explosive chapter in Egypt's story, where faith and power collided, and the empire began to crack in ways that would never fully heal. After Akhenaten's death, the Egyptian empire fell into chaos. His radical reforms had shattered both the government and the people's faith. Temples lay abandoned, priests were divided, and foreign lands once conquered by Egypt began to rebel. The country needed a symbol of unity, someone who could restore the old order and heal a wounded nation. That figure came in the form of a boy Tutankhaten, later renamed Tutankhamun, crowned pharaoh at the age of 9. He was guided by advisors and generals loyal to the old religion. They reinstated the worship of Amun, returned the capital to Thebes, and restored the authority of the temples. The boy king, though young and fragile, became the face of Egypt's return to tradition. But his reign was short. Tutankhamun died before reaching 20. His death remains one of the great mysteries of history, whether from illness, accident, or conspiracy. No one truly knows. Yet his tomb, discovered more than 3,000 years later, preserved almost untouched, became one of the greatest archaeological treasures ever found, a silent echo of a civilization that once believed death could never defeat life. After Tutankhamun, Egypt entered a period of instability once again. Power passed from one general to another, Horemheb, then Ramses I, who founded the 19th dynasty. It was this dynasty that produced one of the most powerful names in Egyptian history, Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. Under his reign, Egypt once again reached a peak of military power and architectural glory. He built vast temples, most famously Abu Simbel, carved into the mountains of Nubia, facing the rising sun. He fought great battles, most notably at Kadesh, against the Hittites, and even though the battle ended in stalemate, it produced the world's first known peace treaty. But behind the magnificence, Egypt was changing. The cost of war and construction drained the treasury. The priests of Amun grew stronger than ever, their wealth rivaling that of the pharaoh himself. And while Egypt still appeared glorious on the surface, within, its power was slowly hollowing out. The empire, though brilliant in its twilight, was already aging, and the cracks within would never again be fully repaired. The period following Ramses II was one of decline, slow, silent, yet inevitable. His successors lacked his strength and vision. While the temples of Amun grew ever richer, the pharaohs grew weaker. The priests controlled vast lands and armies of servants. In many places, their power overshadowed that of the throne itself. Foreign invasions began to strike Egypt's borders. From the west came the Libyans, from the north, the mysterious sea peoples who ravaged the entire Mediterranean. The once mighty Egyptian army, burdened by corruption and lack of resources, could no longer defend the empire as before. The great fortresses along the delta fell one after another. Internally, famine and political division deepened. The Nile's floods, the very heartbeat of Egypt, became unpredictable, sometimes failing for years. Without harvests, the people starved, and faith in the gods turned to despair. The empire had lost its unity. In the south, the priests of Thebes ruled like kings, while in the north, the pharaohs of Tanis clung to power in name only. The third intermediate period began a time of fragmentation, when Egypt, once the ruler of nations, became merely a shadow of itself. Art and architecture lost their grandeur. Instead of colossal temples, small shrines were built. The language of the hieroglyphs began to simplify. The sense of eternal order that had defined Egypt was fading. And though the names of new dynasties appeared, Libyan kings, Nubian kings, and later Assyrian invaders, none could restore the glory of old. Each new ruler tried to revive the gods, rebuild the temples, or reclaim lost lands, but it was like pouring water into desert sand. The Nile still flowed, but the empire that once worshipped it had withered. Centuries of greatness had ended, leaving behind a weakened and exhausted Egypt. But even in darkness, there were still final rays of light. Around 700 BCE, from deep in the south, the kings of Nubia, who had once been vassals of Egypt, rose in power. They marched north, conquering Thebes, and proclaimed themselves rightful heirs to the pharaohs. This was the 25th dynasty, the so-called Black Pharaohs, who sought to restore the old glory of the Nile. For a brief moment, Egypt seemed reborn. Temples were rebuilt, ancient rituals revived, and the gods once again honored with grandeur. But the world around Egypt had changed. To the east, a new power was rising, the Assyrian Empire, fierce and relentless. They invaded, crushed the Nubian pharaohs, and left Egypt in ruins once again. After the Assyrians came the Persians, who turned Egypt into a province of their vast empire. Then came the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great, who conquered Egypt in 332 BCE. Unlike previous invaders, Alexander was seen not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. He respected the Egyptian gods and even declared himself pharaoh. After his death, his general Ptolemy took control, founding the Ptolemaic dynasty, which blended Greek and Egyptian culture. Under the Ptolemies, Egypt entered a new and strange era. The city of Alexandria became one of the most magnificent cities of the ancient world, a crossroads of knowledge, where Greek philosophy met Egyptian spirituality. The great library of Alexandria held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the wisdom of the ancient world, gathered in one place. But beneath that brilliance, Egypt was no longer truly Egyptian. Its rulers spoke Greek, its armies were foreign, and its people lived under a veneer of glory that masked dependence. The old gods were still worshipped, but the pharaoh's power had become merely symbolic. And finally, in 30 BCE, with the death of Queen Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh, and the arrival of Rome, the story of ancient Egypt, the empire of the Nile, of pyramids and gods, came to its end. The land of the pharaohs became a province of the Roman Empire, and Egypt gradually became part of the Greco-Roman world. But the story of Egypt did not end there. Even though the empire had fallen, its spirit endured in stone, in sand, and in the memory of humankind. The Greeks, the Romans, and even later civilizations all looked back to Egypt with awe and reverence. Its science, its art, its architecture, its religion all became the foundation upon which later cultures would build. The pyramids still stood, towering against the desert wind, their peaks catching the first light of every dawn, as if defying time itself. The temples of Luxor, Karnak, and Abu Simbel, half buried in the sands, remained silent witnesses of a greatness that refused to fade. And though dynasties perished, languages vanished, and gods were forgotten, the essence of Egypt, its obsession with eternity, proved victorious. Even death could not silence it. Thousands of years later, explorers and archaeologists would return, brushing away the sands that had hidden the past, and once again, the faces of the pharaohs would emerge proud, calm, unyielding, from the hieroglyphs carved into stone. The voice of the ancients still whispers that no civilization, no matter how mighty, is immune to time. And yet, those who seek eternity in their deeds may still be remembered forever, because perhaps Egypt never truly died. It simply transformed from a kingdom of men into a legend of the world. And every time the wind passes through the desert and touches the face of the pyramids, it seems to whisper that story once more, the story of an immortal civilization still speaking through the sands of time. Tonight, as you look up at the sky, imagine the same stars that once shone upon the Nile thousands of years ago, the same constellations that guided the pharaohs, the priests, and the builders of the pyramids. They are still there, glittering in silence, unchanged by the passage of time. Somewhere beneath those stars, buried under layers of sand and history, lies the echo of a world that once believed itself eternal. A world that rose, ruled, and fell, yet never truly vanished. Because every civilization, no matter how distant, leaves behind a fragment of itself in the soul of humanity. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Egypt, not the gold, not the temples, not the mummies, but the idea that life is fleeting, while greatness is not. That even when kingdoms crumble and names are forgotten, the dream of eternity still lingers in the stones, in the stories, and in us. And so, as the wind moves through the desert and the moonlight glows upon the pyramids, you can almost hear it, the whisper of an ancient empire that once touched the stars and whose dream of eternity still continues. And yet, perhaps the story is not over. For as long as human beings still wonder, still build, still dream of leaving something behind, the spirit of Egypt lives on. Every city that rises toward the sky, every monument carved in stone, every question about life beyond death, they all echo the same longing that once stirred beside the Nile. Maybe, someday, another civilization will look back at us as we now look upon the pharaohs tracing the ruins of our world, reading our words in the dust, and wondering what we believed in, what we loved, what we feared. And when that day comes, may they understand that, like Egypt, we too were reaching for eternity, and that our own dream still whispers in the wind. Because perhaps the fall of Egypt was never truly an end, but a lesson quietly left behind in the sand. It reminds us that greatness is not measured by how long a kingdom stands, but by how deeply its light can reach through the ages. Every civilization rises, shines, and fades, but within that cycle lies something eternal: the human desire to create, to believe, and to leave meaning in the world. The temples may crumble, the statues may break, but the dream that built them, the yearning to touch the divine, still lives within us. And so, the story of Egypt is not a story of ruins. It is a mirror held up to humanity itself, a reminder that even in our impermanence, we are all, in some way, searching for eternity.